Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's often kept completely in the dark. We're exploring the deeply hidden and honestly incredibly heavy emotional toll that disability can take on family dynamics. We're pulling from source material focused on dismantling the burden, ending ableist sibling rivalry. Now, this is a really complex, often totally misunderstood area of family psychology. But here's the thing, understanding it is absolutely crucial if we want to build healthier, genuinely supportive relationships.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, the caregiving paradox. Second, deconstructing the insults. Third, the spoon-fed myth. Fourth, the hidden dangers. And finally, number 5, breaking the toxic cycle.
Section 1. The caregiving paradox. It's truly tragic how a natural, loving family bond can sometimes mutate into this toxic competition simply because assistance is treated as a burden. To really grasp how this happens, we need to shift our perspective directly into the lived reality of the disabled individual. We have to ask, why on earth would someone fear asking their own sibling for help?
Well, the reality is, disabled individuals often feel absolutely terrified to ask their siblings for a hand. Why? Because they carry this profound, crushing fear of being seen as a heavy burden. They desperately want autonomy. They want equality, just like anyone else. And asking for help can suddenly feel like a direct threat to that very independence.
We can map out exactly how this natural sibling relationship gets corrupted. It follows a pretty predictable cycle. First, it starts with a power inequality. The non-disabled sibling ends up holding all the power, which forces the other into a dependent role. Second, that dynamic breeds deep-seated resentment. The helper feels trapped, and the disabled sibling feels resented or even hated. Third, this evolves into what's called a perfect child dynamic, where the able-bodied sibling acts superior. And finally, step 4, the whole thing erupts into this fierce toxic competition for parental focus and attention.
Section 2. Deconstructing the insults.
To truly get to the bottom of this dynamic, we need to deconstruct the specific verbal abuse and ableist misconceptions that feed the fire. Take a classic insult, right? Being called lazy. Siblings often misinterpret an inability to finish a task as just a simple lack of effort. But the reality is starkly different. Living with a disability requires massive, unseen amounts of daily energy. Fatigue is a very real medical boundary, not some sort of personality flaw. Then you have this label, you're just being stubborn. To a sibling, doing things a specific way, or maybe refusing certain types of help, just looks like the person is being difficult on purpose. But again, the reality is entirely different. Insisting on doing things a certain way is actually a vital strategy. It's how a disabled person ensures their own safety, their comfort, and maintains a small, but absolutely necessary, sense of personal control over their environment. And honestly, this next one might be the cruelest misconception of the bunch. I am cleverer than you. This label falsely links physical or neurodivergent limitations to lower intelligence. Let's be clear, needing assistance with physical tasks or processing data a bit differently has absolutely nothing to do with a person's core intelligence or value. Using physical ability to devalue a sibling's mind is just a completely false and incredibly damaging stereotype.
Section 3. The spoon-fed myth.
Now, what's really interesting here is this phrase, spoon-fed. It's one of the most painful, specific insults used in these toxic dynamics. Hearing, you always need to be spoon-fed, basically mocks a lack of independence. But we have to completely reframe this. Assistance is a necessity. It is not a luxury. These accommodations are essential tools that simply level the playing field. They are absolutely not a demand for special treatment. When siblings throw around insults like the spoon-fed myth, they are engaging in something the sources define as weaponized vulnerability. This perfectly captures the toxic power dynamic at play. It's taking a moment of pure vulnerability, like someone simply asking for basic, essential help, and turning it into a weapon to humiliate them. The sibling providing the help acts superior, purely to make the other person feel small. So, why did disabled individuals just endure this weaponized vulnerability? We'll take a look at this quote from a grandmother in the source material. Family is family, no matter what, who will look after you, or who will be there in your life. This sums up the immense, systemic, cultural pressure disabled individuals face. They're basically told to quietly endure verbal abuse and keep the peace, just to secure future caregivers.
Section 4. The hidden dangers. If this dynamic is left unaddressed, the psychological and physical consequences are honestly severe. First, it fundamentally destroys family trust. The disabled person ends up feeling utterly unsafe asking that sibling for anything.
Second, it creates this deeply false sense of internalized shame. It makes them believe they are a burden just for having basic human needs. And third, it forces unsafe independence, pushing the individual to attempt dangerous things completely alone just to avoid being ridiculed.
It's basically a domino effect that plays out in 4 phases. Step 1, the verbal abuse occurs. Step 2, that internalized shame builds up as the person hears these cruel words repeatedly and actually starts believing the lies. Step 3, they completely stop asking for help just to avoid the humiliation. And finally, step 4, their physical safety is severely compromised.
Total isolation. That's the terrifying endpoint here. The ultimate result of this unchecked, toxic sibling rivalry is the complete isolation of the disabled individual. They become so incredibly afraid of humiliation that they will choose to remain entirely alone, refusing to ask for help even in a genuine medical emergency.
Section 5. Breaking the toxic cycle. Okay, we've mapped out the problem. Now let's talk solutions. If you are watching this and experiencing this dynamic yourself, I want to speak directly to you for a second. This rivalry is not your fault. You absolutely deserve relief from this internalized shame. These conflicts are born from a flawed family system, not from your basic physical or neurodivergent needs. When we contrast the root cause with the actual solution, it's like a light bulb goes off. The problem is that the family system fails because siblings are forced into these really heavy roles of caregivers and patients. So what's the solution? Proper external family support. The family system needs outside help so that siblings are allowed to just be siblings without the suffocating weight of mandatory caregiving hanging over their heads.
So the crucial point is this: systemic repair requires some very specific shifts in how we think and speak. We have to stop blaming the individual for their needs. We must acknowledge physical limits as strict medical boundaries, not just behavioral choices or laziness. And we absolutely must reframe accommodations as essential tools for living that level the playing field, rather than viewing them as special favors.
I want to wrap up this explainer by leaving you with something to really chew on. If we agree that accommodations are truly just essential tools, how can we collectively shift the burden of caregiving away from siblings and push it towards society to provide better external support for these families? Thank you so much for joining me as we unpack the source material today. Keep asking those great questions, keep seeking to understand, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.